Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm that it is 5:58 and I have just received confirmation that we are streaming and recording. Therefore, you may begin your meeting.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Good evening, Council, members of SLT, and the members of the viewing public. I see we have quorum. I call this meeting to order, and I would first of all like to apologize to members of the public that have been waiting patiently for this meeting to begin. Council had a special council meeting that ran into our regular time this evening. So if you're still there, thank you for waiting for us, and we're ready to go. First of all, we have the land recognition statement, which will be read tonight by Councillor Kaur.
Thank you, Your Honor. We begin this meeting by acknowledging the land on which we gather is a traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people, many who continue to live and work here today. These territories is covered by the Upper Canada Treaty and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nation, Métis, and Inuit people, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resource and friendship of these great and proud people.
Thank you, Councillor Kaur. Now turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We have received a request for amendment. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt, that the agenda be amended to move item 17, resolution to move in camera, to be heard prior to staff reports, being item 10, presentations and consideration of reports. To you, Mr. Mayor, for consideration and discussion.
Thank you. Any discussion on this amendment? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson. Sorry, Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, I have received a request for amendment. This is being put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Hahn, that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham procedural bylaw regarding delegations be suspended to allow the delegation of SAW Custom Homes, and that the agenda be amended to include the said delegation as item 4.2.2. To you, Mr. Mayor, just for information, this would require a 2/3 majority vote in the positive to carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this motion? Oh, Councillor Kaur, go ahead, your motion.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. It's very important that we give everyone on both sides of this conflict an opportunity to revisit the issue. We owe it to both of the developers, and most of all, we owe it to the citizens of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hahn, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Yes, to the mayor, absolutely. I would agree with Councillor Kaur. I think at this point in time, it's unfortunately the local tabloid has spun this in such a light that it would all be inappropriate, and we should have fear and intimidation, and we shouldn't try to do the best for our residents. At this point in time, I think it's safe to say that I was voted in because people wanted me to speak up and do what's right for the community, and that includes allowing people to speak. So absolutely, I think we should move forward and let this delegation.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments on the amendment? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
No.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
No.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
No.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That vote is defeated as a 4-3. Therefore, we do move on to our next, to you, Mr. Mayor, if you'd like to call for any other amendments to the agenda, now would be the time.
Thank you. Any other councillor have an amendment or amendments to the agenda as presented. Councilor Hildebrand, is that your hand, or are you making an adjustment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I was just making an adjustment to my laptop for the screen.
Okay,
Thank
very
you.
good. Yep, no problem. Not seeing any other amendments.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. We do have a motion then put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Corr. Be it resolved that the agenda for the June 20th, 2022 regular meeting of council be adopted as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on the amended agenda? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Corr.
Yes?
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, you can now move to the disclosure of pecuniary interest.
Thank you. After viewing the agenda, does any councillor have a disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I have so noted. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your delegations. We do have one registered delegate with us tonight. That's Mr. Tim Nohara. He's the chair of the Cannabis Control Committee. I will just ask that Ms. Leach bring Mr. Nohara into the meeting. Thank you. We can see that Mr. Nohara is now in the meeting. Mr. Nohara, if you like, you can turn on your camera.
Oh,
Hello?
there he is.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thank you. I would just remind the presenter that there is a 10-minute delegation limit, and you can begin your delegation whenever you like.
Okay, Tim, welcome to council tonight, and you have the floor.
Thank you very much, everybody. Just one moment here. I'm operating off a laptop, so I have less real estate than normal. Just one moment. Here we go. So thank you for the opportunity to brief you on behalf of the Cannabis Control Committee. As the mandate of the Cannabis Control Committee is coming to a close with the fall election, I'm here tonight to report to council and to the community by providing a summary of the Pelham cannabis regulations that have been developed by the CCC and approved by council over the past 3 years together. I will also provide information on how residents and stakeholders can participate in the use of these Pelham cannabis regulations. And to make the material accessible, the committee has created a 2-pager that I would like to review with you tonight. To get the word out, we intend to post this document on the town's website and to communicate possibly with the local press. So with that introduction, I will proceed with reviewing what's before you, what I believe you can see before you. So this is a 2-pager that has been created to summarize the work that we've accomplished together over the past 3 years. And in the front side, the side that we're looking at, there's a back side to this document. The front side is what we're calling the Pelham Cannabis Regulations. The upper section, the green section, there are 5 instruments, municipal and planning tools that we have worked on together to develop the official plan amendment, the zoning bylaw amendment. Both of those, as we know, are before the Ontario Land Tribunal, and the hearing is to be returned on July the 25th. There are links provided there to the documents themselves as they went to the tribunal in January. And so clicking on those links, you can access the documents. There's also information on the right-hand side in terms of how stakeholders and residents can attend online to the hearings that will resume on July the 25th. And we anticipate a decision from the OLT, from the Ontario Land Tribunal, possibly this fall. The remaining 3 instruments, the third is the Odorous Industries Nuisance Bylaw that we're familiar with. That bylaw, the link is there to it. There was the original bylaw and an amendment. That bylaw is also being challenged, and it has been appealed to the Ontario Superior Court, and we likely will not have or hear of any hearings until 2023. There's a site plan control bylaw, Bylaw 4262, 2020, that was approved, and that is in effect. There are no legal challenges on that one. And there's a light bylaw that the committee drafted, but we have deferred that light bylaw. So we have not brought that light bylaw to council because there are legal challenges in other communities that we are waiting on to settle first. So with those 5 instruments, the lower section that I'm going to move to now, you can scroll down. Thank you. Perfect. So there's a summary for each of these that is being provided. Beginning on the left, the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments overview. For each of these instruments, there's a summary. It has a purpose and a summary. So the official plan amendment, its purpose is to establish permissions for indoor cannabis and industrial hemp, and requires a zoning bylaw amendment in order to, with established criteria, in order to set up a new shop in town. There's a summary provided for you. The main purpose is to conduct some studies on a case-by-case basis in order to ensure that we won't have adverse effects. The zoning bylaw amendment, it follows a similar format. We've created 2 new zones in the town one in the agricultural and one in the industrial. And for outdoor growing, there is a 300-meter setback for outdoor growing, but for indoor growing, the setbacks will be determined on a site-by-site basis based on those studies that we mentioned earlier. And in terms of implementation, it's a planning department that's responsible for processing new applications to establish new facilities in the town, cannabis facilities in the town. There'll be peer-reviewed studies. There'll be public meetings to inform residents and stakeholders, and there'll be a public meeting with council to actually approve a bylaw amendment. Scrolling back a little bit to the top, we'll shift to the right-hand side of the page, the Odorous Industries Nuisance Bylaw. So it too has a purpose to help regulate odor with respect to odorous industrial facilities. The only facilities in that category presently in the town, to my knowledge, are cannabis facilities. And again, from a summary, it's to avoid the adverse effects that lead to things like loss of enjoyment or discomfort, and it involves applying air filtration systems. There's a bylaw enforcement regime associated with this. From an implementation standpoint, it's the bylaw department that handles this through when there are complaints or on their own, and the facility must add mitigations if needed in accordance with a contingency odor mitigation plan. Again, this bylaw is before the courts, or will be before the courts. The site plan control bylaw amendment, its purpose is to ensure that new cannabis facilities are subject to site plan control. There was a prior exemption, and this simple bylaw change removed that exemption. And again, it's the planning department who is responsible prior to the issuance of a building permit. If we can spin quickly to the backside of this document, the backside is entitled "How Can Residents and Stakeholders Participate?" And so once again, for each of these bylaws, each of these instruments, there's a section here that helps residents and stakeholders understand how to use, what's their part in these bylaws. Beginning with the Odorous Industries Nuisance Bylaw, it begins with filing a complaint, and there's an indication here on how one does that. There is the ability to send, if we scroll down a little bit, there is the ability to send complaints by email or in person. There is some information here provided concerning those two other methods of bringing complaints to the town. And if we scroll back up, thank you, I appreciate. So now we're going to shift to the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments. And again, there's two types. Once these are established by the Ontario Land Tribunal, there really are two types of opportunities for the public to participate. One is with the Committee of Adjustment for minor expansions of existing facilities. The second is with public meetings and with council meetings when there's a new application. And residents can register for notifications on the town website to be informed of those. Scrolling down, we've provided some contact information to residents. And then the final part at the bottom before I'll turn it over to questions is that our mandate is ending. And residents may wish to promote to council involvement in the next council, and we would suggest any residents who are interested contact their council. With that, I'll turn it over to any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tim, for a great presentation. And before I turn it over to council, I'd just like to again thank you and all members of the CCC for the yeoman service you've given the town. I know you've read more books in the last 3 years on both cannabis than you people have in your own respective businesses. And we really appreciate the time and effort you've given this town and the residents to get this work that you've just previewed done. And we really appreciate your time and work. Council, any comments or questions to the presenter? Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Mr. O'Hara has done, and the committee has done an outstanding job. The part that disappoints us is that we're not going to be able to get the job totally done before the end of our term. We've done everything we possibly can at this point within the legal limits we're set. And I can assure the residents that we're going to continue on and till the last day that this council can make a vote to do whatever we can to make sure that the next council gets a head start on this cannabis file. And we certainly appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions to the presenter? Councillor Olson. And you are on mute, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I of course want to add my thanks to the committee and to the chair. And I wanted to ask you a question of opinion. There's the cannabis producers have a program that they've started called Stand for Craft. And Stand for Craft is designed to request that the federal government change their excise tax regime, obviously to reduce it so that they can make more money at it. And they say that let me see, they say, and I quote, we are still having trouble making ends meet at the end of every month because of the excise tax. And they want to have that tax reduced. And is there any point, and I'll ask this of the CAO as well, is there any point of creating a letter from council to the federal government and taxing authorities and Canada Revenue Agency to resist these kinds of changes? Because 75% of the excise tax goes to the province, and there's only one taxpayer, and here we are reducing taxes on the basis of cannabis. What do you think?
Any comments on that, Tim?
So I wasn't familiar with that. I'd certainly like to read up on that. What I can say is certainly, and certainly I'm biased here in saying this, I think the government should be providing some tax dollars back to the municipalities on this file because of the efforts that are required by staff by planning, by bylaw, to deal with this. That would be sort of just my knee-jerk reaction, not really being informed on the issue.
Thank you. Mr. CEO, any comments on the excise tax letter?
This morning, I sort of became aware of efforts coming out of the Essex County area, looking towards building a coalition of municipalities interested in looking and advocating to increase property tax, to change the classification of cannabis facilities so that they're not classified as agricultural. And that seems to me an area that would be reasonable for us to focus on as a municipal corporation, because of course that goes directly to our revenue line and goes to the bigger question of what actually a cannabis producer is and the nature of the industry or agriculture, as the case may be. The challenge with this item, Councillor Olson brings up, is that it fundamentally goes to income tax, albeit in this case corporate tax, which is not something we participate in. And generally speaking, we try to discourage our commentary on items outside of our jurisdiction. So we don't normally pass resolutions on national defense, any issue that's beyond municipal purview. That said, Council, you have every right to support or oppose anything you wish. It's just that we normally try to stay more or less within our sandbox.
Back to you, Councillor Olson. Any other comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just that question. Perhaps it was off the mark a little bit, but I think it takes this is going to take coalitions and groups supporting each other in partnerships to solve this problem. Several aspects of it, and I certainly don't want to detract from the work of the committee. I would only regard this as a supplementary type of a thing. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments? Councillor Court?
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, to Tim. Thank you very much for your hard work over the last 3.5 years. You and your committee did a wonderful job. And again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions for the presenter? Not seeing any. Again, thank you for appearing before Council tonight, Mr. O'Hara, and we again appreciate all your work over the last 3 years. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I could just respond in closing. First of all, I take that thanks back. We have a phenomenal committee that has developed and some have brought in incredible expertise on this file that has helped us. So I certainly appreciate the thanks and will reflect it back. I will tell you that I will be back in August with recommendations to Council. So I acknowledge Councillor Hildebrand's comment that while we've, I think, lifted the heavy stuff, there are still some unfinished details, and we'll come back to you later in August with some recommendations that you may wish to take forward in the next Council. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, and good evening.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, thank you. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive the delegation from Tim O'Hara, Chair of the Cannabis Control Committee, for information. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any further discussion on the presentation? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item of business, which is the approval of the adoption of minutes. And I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. 1 RC 11/2022, June 7th, 2022, regular council. To you, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that you call for any errors or omissions.
Okay, thank you. After viewing the minutes, is there any errors or omissions that any councillor would like to present? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. As you're aware, I was absent for that meeting, but at near the beginning of the minutes for the there was the notice of motion, and it has me as voting in that, and the adoption of the minutes at that meeting, it has me voting in that, but I'm not in the rest of the meeting. So my name needs to be taken off those two items.
Certainly, you were marked as absent on those minutes, but perhaps it was a technical difficulty. I'll certainly review those and revise those, so those minutes going forward as amended for council's consideration, unless there's any other errors.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other errors or omissions? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor, this vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes?
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item, which is item 7. This is the lift any items from the consent agenda. So any member of council who wishes to lift an item, as they may wish to change the resolution attached, can identify that now. Otherwise, if the councilor just wishes to speak to an item, they're not required to lift that. To you, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that you call for any items to be lifted.
Okay, thank you. Is there any item on the consent agenda that any councillor would like to lift? Councillor Olson?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, 8.4.1.
Okay, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. I've so noted that. Are there any other items?
And is there any other items that a councillor would like to lift? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. We do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that the consent agenda items as listed on the June 20th, 2022 council agenda be received and that the recommendations contained therein be approved. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion. Council can discuss any of those items.
Okay, is there any of the consent agendas items that you would, any councillor would like to comment on or discuss? Councillor Wink?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. 8.3.1, the permanent story walk installation in Woodstream Park. I commend the library and town staff for bringing this forward. This is an excellent initiative. I've talked to a number of people about this, and they're very excited for this program being implemented, and kudos to all involved to bring this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. It seems to be well received in the community, and anyone who attended any of the library open houses, they were given a look at a lot of initiatives that are going to be happening in the near future. Because of the union, things are really bustling at the libraries. Both communities seem to be welcoming the joining of the two towns in this manner, and it's a beginning. It's a great beginning to a new start for both buildings. Thank you. Any other comments on that 8.31 on the walks? Not seeing any. And how about on any other lift agenda or any agenda item? Any other comments? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
So again, this is for the approval for all the items save and except the 8.4.1. And this vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes?
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Therefore, you are on your items for separate consideration. And as noted, Councillor Olson has lifted item 8.4.1. If I may, for the record, read the attached resolution for council. The attached resolution to this was, be it resolved that council received correspondence from the Ontario Ombudsman and Associated Ombudsman of Ontario report dated June 10th, 2022 regarding an investigation into a closed meeting held by council for the town of Pelham on April 19th, 2021 for information. and that council hereby acknowledge the importance of being vigilant and adhering with their individual and collective obligation to ensure that council complies with its responsibilities under the Municipal Act 2001 and its procedural bylaw, and that council hereby acknowledges its obligations to ensure that no subject in closed session is discussed unless it clearly comes within one of the statutory exemptions to the open meeting requirements, and that council directs staff to ensure its responsibilities to process in camera provides a general description of the issues to be discussed in a way that maximizes the information available to the public while not undermining the reason for excluding the public, and that council directs staff to include additional information and training in the upcoming 2022 to 2026 council during orientation. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, Councillor Olson, you lifted the 8.4.1. Your comments, please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you. It's my understanding that we remain under a duty of confidentiality regarding the closed meeting discussion, and I will, of course, confine my comments to the Ombudsman report for that reason. The Ontario Ombudsman promotes fairness, accountability, and transparency in the public sector by investigating public complaints and systemic issues within its jurisdiction. The process is intended to be educational and corrective, not punitive. It's a mature and constructive process in that way. The Ombudsman review that determined that the town of Pelham contravened the Municipal Act of 2001 when we held a closed meeting on April 19th, 2021. The review also found that the town failed to describe the general nature of the discussion of the resolution to proceed in camera. The Ombudsman found that council, not individuals, contravened the Municipal Act of 2001. As members of council, we have an individual and collective obligation to ensure that meetings are open to the public and restricted to the narrow reasons described in section 239. Our clerks have already taken steps to add an enhanced description of the items to be discussed in closed session, and that leaves the balance of the Ombudsman's determination. The public has a fundamental right to observe municipal decision making, and going into closed session, council diminished the right of the public to see the manner in which decisions around the development of the airport are being addressed. As a host community of the airport, Pelham has a special and important obligation to the stewardship of these lands. To further remedy council's decision to go in camera on this occasion, I move the following amendment. The council waive confidentiality on the totality of what was discussed in the closed session on April 19th, 2021. And that the video recording of the meeting be posted on the Town of Pelham website. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I believe we need a seconder.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, we would need a seconder.
Okay, is there a seconder for the motion put forward by Councillor Olson? Councillor Wink, I see you will second it. Thank you. Back to you, Madam Clerk.
There is an amendment on the floor with a mover and seconder. Certainly, council can discuss, or if council has no discussion, I can call the vote.
Okay, no, let's make sure there is no one that wants to discuss this. Any discussion on the motion before us? Or Councillor Olson, you already said your piece. You are the motion you're the member that brought the motion forward. Any other comments on the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I would simply say that by keeping this under the as a confidential matter when it should be public, and the Ombudsman has said that, it would only it'll only lead to more speculation, probably wrongly, about what we've been discussing, and lead to all kinds of misinformation, and perhaps, and I generally think that these things should be in public anyway.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Councilor Olson. Councilor Wink, you seconded the motion. Any comments?
Yeah, so I think all of us ran on the premise of transparency to the public, to our taxpayers and our voters. It was pointed out by the ombudsman that we made a mistake, that meeting should not have been in closed session. And as a result, I support Councillor Olson in making the content of that meeting available to the public.
Okay, thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kaur.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. What is the CEO's thoughts about this?
Okay, Mr. CAO.
The, my most key thought is that it was sort of a technical violation, but an inadvertent one. And when you read through the report, it mentions everything that was discussed. And so, I mean, there are two pieces of this. The first is, I think from a legal position, I don't think there's any privilege to be asserted, because there isn't anything there wasn't any legal advice. There wasn't anything that was, we only sort of realized after the fact, there wasn't anything that exactly qualified to be in closed session. So I don't see any downside to the motion. That being said, if you want me to argue this both ways, seeing as there's no particular privilege attaching, waiving it is sort of a painless thing. Conversely, the Ombudsman report says everything that happened in there. It's not like it had gaps. I had the shared life experiences everyone else on council did. So the minutes aren't particularly more illustrative or informative than the report from the Ombudsman's office. So wisdom of Solomon over and back to you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any other comments, Councillor Kaur?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, questions before we call the vote? Councillor Hahn?
Through the mayor, so based on the information that CEO Cribs just shared, if there's no benefit, and in fact the report coming from the ombudsman articulates exactly, the thoughts that he has, the only net benefit would to have a gotcha moment. So that's not really good teamwork on behalf of council to try to pick apart other team members in council, I would think. Hopefully that's not the intention. I certainly hope not, because we're working as a team to benefit our community. So, but make your decision on I think, however your moral compass points. But certainly if the report is available to our public, then the public can read that report from the ombudsman and have their questions answered.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Any other comments or questions? Okay, before we vote, I will say that I support Councillor Olson's motion. We did run on transparency. I've heard every one of council has stated that at least once or twice, that we ran on transparency. So I will be supporting of the motion. Madam Clerk, and before you call the vote, Madam Clerk, I would like a recorded vote.
It's recorded.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I will.
It's already recorded.
It means a little different this way.
Thank you.
No.
The vote would begin with Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That motion therefore does carry, and that brings you to your main motion as amended. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, main motion amended. Any further discussion on that? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. And just for clarity, I will be using the same mover and seconder, so that's Councillor Olson and Councillor Wink. To you, Mr. Mayor, the vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Counselor Wink,
Yes.
Counselor Hahn,
No.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item of business. We are on the motion resolution to move in camera. I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Kaur, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider a matter under Section 239(2) of the Municipal Act as follows. C, proposed or pending disposition of land by the municipality, and F, advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. One item, property located in Ward 2. And C, proposed or pending disposition of land of the municipality. One item, file numbers LO7 2022-01-S and LO7 2022-02-S, property located in Ward 2. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this item to go in camera? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. If council can just give me a few moments to stop the recording and the streaming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. I have confirmed that we are now live streaming, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that council adjourn the in-camera session and that council do now rise with no report. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion on the motion before us? Not seeing any.
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your first staff report. We do have a motion put forth by Councillor Olson, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that council receive report 2022-0141, 2022 road rehabilitation budget, program budget, additional funding for information, and that council approve the award of the 2022 road rehabilitation program to Walker Construction in the amount of $690,093 plus applicable taxes, and that council approve a budget increase of $93,300 for project RD09-2022 funded from the road reserves. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. After seeing this report, is there any comments or questions council may have for Public Works? And I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment. I think this is not the first time we've seen an increase in budget. I won't be the last time. It's just the economic climate that we're going in, that costs of materials are going up so rapidly that, once we put things out to tender, they're more than what we expect. And, I fully support this recommendation, but acknowledge that this might not be the last.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor. Perhaps before I go to any other councillors, I will go to the director. Any additional comments you may have for council, Mr. Moore?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. So echoing on Councillor Wink's comments, no, these are not reports we like to bring in front of council, that's for sure. But the climate has changed. Prices have gone up dramatically, specifically anything petroleum-based, which asphalt pavements are. So those costs are highly volatile right now. With respect to this program, this program specifically is going to deal with rehabilitation of roads in our rural area. We're identifying severe failures and distress on those rural roads. We need to invest dollars into them. Right now, our crews are constantly still patching potholes, trying to make the roads drivable and passable. So it's critical that we carry out these programs, invest the money into our road network. It provides safe transportation for the residents of Pelham, and it also reduces ongoing maintenance costs that we incur mostly in the spring. This time, even pushing into the summer months here, we're still battling, trying to keep up with the condition of the road. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Director. I know talking to the residents in the north end of town, they are very appreciative that this road will be getting some attention, and we're hoping that other roads, crossroads, whether it be Kilman, Tice, the list is quite long, as you know, and it's good to see that we're starting to make some headway and getting caught up on the job at hand. Any other comments or questions from councilors? Not seeing any. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, this vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next staff report, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Hahn. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0139 Recreation Proposed Pelham STEM Camp Summer 2022 for information, and that the mayor and clerk be authorized to sign the memorandum of understanding with Innov STEMs Labs, Inc. to supply equipment, program, curriculum, materials, and staff training to implement Pelham STEM camps for the summer of 2022, and that council approve the following rates and fees immediately to be applied. Weekly camp registration, $290 per child, 25% discount on 3 or more children. Early bird camp weekly registration, $279 per child, 25% discount on 3 or more. Multiple week registration discount each week after 2 weeks, $10. Extended care, 7:30 to 5:30 p.m., $38 a week. Optional Friday lunch for $10. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Great. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Definitely a summer camp, a little different than our other programs, I think. Any comments or questions on this report? Councillor Olson.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. It says in your report, you say that there are 115 on the waiting list. How many will this take care of, do you think?
Ms. Van Ravenbrink?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. Probably half of the children, what we're looking at is, we have a 1-to-7 ratio, so we would take probably up to 49, 50, depending on staffing as well.
Thank you. Councillor?
So it looked through you, Mr. Mayor, it looks like a terrific program, and the young people, the youngest of all, have been suffering the most from the social dynamics that they're missing out on. And you know, I'd like to know that is there any other way we can take care of all the waiting lists? Because you know, it just seems like this is so important and something that the town can deliver. And do it in a really nice way, because we get lots of positive reports from it.
To the director?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. We have always had a 1-to-7 ratio, basically because of the types of camps that we offer with trips and so forth. The other issue is getting staff. And, you know, everywhere it's incredible how lack of staff or the, you know, students to work. We have gone out again for advertising for leaders. Right now, we have filled, on average, we'll have between 80 and 100 children per week in our existing camps. And we do want to expand. So we're hoping to accommodate as many as possible. It hurts us as well.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, do we, at the end of the program, the trailer that is part of it, what happens to that? Does that go back to STEM or?
Through you, Mayor, this agreement is for the summer months. We will see how the summer operates. There are more opportunities in the fall and winter. And at that time, I'm hoping by August, we should be able to know how things are going and what possibilities we would have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. I believe I did read that somewhere. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand.
Mr. Mayor, thank you for bringing this report, Ms. Van Ravensway. I think it's an excellent opportunity. Like Councillor Olson said, these young people have suffered and they need a place to go. And I think that the more opportunities we can provide, the better it is. So anything we can do, I'll be totally supportive of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hildebrand. Any other comments or questions? I will turn to the clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring you to your next agenda item. We do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hildebrand, seconded by Councillor Kaur. Be it resolved that Council receive Report 2022-0138 Final Parking Strategy Report for information, and that Council receive the Final Parking Strategy Report from RV Anderson Associates Limited, and that staff be directed to include the implementation of the recommendations contained in the Parking Strategy Report to improve the supply of public parking in downtown Fonthill, Fenwick, Ridgeville, and at the MCC in future capital budget planning processes. And that staff be directed to include in the new comprehensive zoning bylaw the recommendations contained in the parking strategy report with regards to parking requirements for various land uses. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on this staff report? Councillor Stewart.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's a really good report, but at this point, I would like to have it divided so that at this time, we receive the report. I believe that council needs to have a fulsome discussion of everything that's in the report with regards to, you know, the downtown parking, and more importantly, all the issues we have with residential parking and the shortfalls that we see. I don't believe, I know this was done by professionals, but I don't believe that it truly reflects the concerns that this council has. So I would like to receive it and then have further discussions about the impact it has on our parking throughout the whole town, most importantly, the residential.
Okay, thank you. Let me turn to the CAO. Any comments on that way forward, Mr. CAO?
Your Worship, Council controls its process and its timing. There's never a problem with dividing a question or a proposition before you. So certainly, and as a basic minimum, you certainly want to receive it this evening. You can choose to take all or some or none of the recommendations at this time. We can certainly set up future meetings wherein this is an agenda item for further discussion. Frankly, you have the staff thoughts in the, what I'll call the wraparound report, and you have the official document before you. So, this is a nice time to ask Director Weens. Admittedly, she's not the author of the report, you understand, but of all of us, she's the best versed. So firstly, what Councillor Stewart seeks to do is entirely supportable by the rules, and if and you have every right to do that, and no one's trying to force you to make decisions in a time frame that's uncomfortable to council. So we're happy. We're really looking for guidance from you on this. We were directed and obliged to bring in this work product. Obviously, it took about a year and a half longer, arguably even 2 years longer than anyone thought it was going to. Councillor Hahn brought this as a motion pre-COVID, and it's taken till now to get a finished product. But here we are, and as you please, we'll proceed as you please.
Okay, thank you. With those words, I will indeed go to Director of Planning, Ms. Weens. Any thoughts on the receiving and pushing it down the road to another council meeting?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Certainly, I think receiving the report is the right thing to do. With respect to the following recommendations, tonight you're not making any decisions on, kind of the specific recommendations. They would come back to council as part of budget deliberations, and, we can't do them all at once. And they would come over, several years that we would come forward with through the budget process, implementing the recommendations in the various areas that are identified in the parking study. So the report, the second recommendation is that we just be directed to do that, but we haven't really identified what comes first, second, or third. Other than we know that Ridgeville is an issue, so that will be a priority. And in downtown Fenwick, it's also very close to nearing its capacity with respect to parking, so that needs to come forward. Maybe not next year, perhaps the following year. And of course, there's the issue about what to do with the MCC. And so that too is a bigger conversation for council to have. It's not specific to this report in and of itself. The third recommendation with respect to bringing forward the parking recommendations in this report to the into the comprehensive zoning bylaw. Again, we take council's direction on that, and happy to do whatever it is that council wishes us to do. So, that we are certainly working on the zoning bylaw, as council is aware. We've had a public meeting, and we will be bringing a further report to council on that later this summer. And, again, there's another opportunity for council to have a discussion about that as part of the approval of the zoning bylaw.
Excellent. Thank you for that. So go ahead, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's the last paragraph that I think that I'm having the most difficulty with, that staff be directed to include the new zoning bylaw contained in the strategy, included in the comprehensive zoning bylaw, before council has had that discussion as to what we expect for the amount of parking for residential, multi-residential apartments, nursing homes. We need to have that discussion and have council make those decisions before it's included in the comprehensive zoning bylaw. That's how I look at it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor. Any other councillor have comments? And I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. One of the goals I have is to pass the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. That being said, the impact that specific parking spaces has on the zoning bylaw, because it specifically refers to the number of spaces. So I too have an issue with regards to the number of spaces allowed for single detached, semi-developed, and street townhouses. To me, they should be 2 parking spaces. So I want to make sure that at least those technical details get cleared up so that we can pass the zoning bylaw before the end of our term. That is my goal.
Okay, thank you. I see the CAO wishes to speak.
So pragmatically, there are only two ways for us to set it up so that you can have this discussion. The one is to follow recommendation number 3 as Director Wiens drafted it, which is to say we write it into the zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw gets to you later this summer, and you debate it then and there. It'll be on an agenda, it'll be written there, and you can debate that number's right, that number's too high, that number's too low. The only alternative to that is that Director Wiens write you another report, standalone report with this is the numbers we suggest putting in, or that the consultants suggests. Here's what staff thinks. What do you think? So, yeah, I mean, it has to be on an agenda for you to talk about it lawfully. And so we're going to have to write another report. We know we're putting the zoning bylaw in front of you. So when we say put it in, only you can put something in by approving it. We put it in by drafting it, but it's not worth a hill of beans, right? We can't pass anything. So we could bring it back to you reading the way we think it should, and with some commentary on here's how it reads and why, and you could change the number if a majority of you believe you should change the numbers, that's when you would do it. Or we bring the standalone report. It's going to be one of those two things. There isn't really a third option. So that's why that reads like that. Putting it in is us putting it in. It doesn't go in, and it's not a new zoning bylaw until you say it is. The power rests with council, and that won't change.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Well, and when you explain it that way, I would think have staff write it into the zoning bylaw, and then when we get that in front of council, that's when we would go, if it pleases council, we'd go line by line, number by number, and then do the will of council that way. Is that what you're saying, Mr. CAO?
Entirely viable. What I can say is if you go with option or recommendation 3 that we put it in, I'm still using air quotes, we will go out of our way to highlight that. We'll include it in bold yellow, and Director Wiens will also draw your attention to it in her wraparound report so that it's very clear and it doesn't inadvertently slip by.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stewart, what are your thoughts on that?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, as David Cribbs has explained it, as long as we are going to have the opportunity at that time to make the decisions, for each type of facility, each type of housing, as long as we can go through it and make those decisions on the zoning bylaw, then I'm okay with it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand, you also commented after hearing the CAO's explanation of how this would unfold. Are you okay with that?
I'm perfectly okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillor have questions or comments concerning the way forward? Not seeing any, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, I've just noted that Councillor Stewart has withdrew her request for the motion to be divided. Unless that's mistaken, I can go ahead and call for the vote.
Okay. Councillor Stewart, you've withdrawn the divided request?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote, therefore, then begins with Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next staff report. And I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Hildebrandt. Be it resolved that Council receive report 2022-0144 parking and development options for lands adjacent to the Meridian Community Center for information. And hereby, and therefore, be it resolved that Council direct staff to pursue option blank by A, referring the matter to the 2023 budget, including parking lot cost options, and or B, initiating the workflow to result in a severance of the subject land so that the northerly or southerly portion is retained for future parking lot purposes and the northerly or southerly option is to be sold for development purposes, and or C, requiring that staff report back with recommendations on how to specifically subdivide the subject lands by September 6, 2022, and further be it resolved that staff are to report back with the progress and status update pertaining to this file by September 6, 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, there is a blank, so were 4 options within that report, so staff are looking for council to select an option, and depending on that option, the A, B, or C are relevant or not, so we can work through those. To you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. Council, any discussion, questions on this report? Councilor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor, I am not in favor of selling this property. We already have a parking shortage, and that would just exacerbate the issue. If we ever move, whether it's a library or a town hall, or at any point in time want to develop anything else in and around the MCC, if we sell the land, that opportunity is lost. And so that would not be something I would be in favor of, and I don't believe my constituents would either. That being said, and I know I've mentioned this before, and I think it should be something that this council consider, and probably could be done still in this term, and that is to prep that area so it still can be used as a temporary parking lot, using some of the materials that could be used in the future for a permanent parking lot once it's paved, but to at least prep it so it can be used for a gravel parking lot, for overflow parking, for Silver Stick, for the home show, and for a myriad of other uses when people are trying to use the MCC. So I think that's something that we should endeavor to do. And conversation, and perhaps I'll let the Director of Public Works speak to this. There's an opportunity to use some of those same building materials, in the final construction phase. So it wouldn't be a net loss at all. So we may lose some material, but we can pave it and use some of the new practices for water collection, et cetera, at a later date when we have more money to go down that road.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We do have the Director of Public Works with us, of course. Mr. Marr, any comments on this plan going ahead?
Yes, thank you. To you, Mr. Mayor. In February this year, staff brought a report forward to council, which provided some options with respect to some temporary parking areas of Part 4. At that time of the report, the estimated cost to basically strip the topsoil and place a foot of crushed granular stone was estimated at about $170,000. Just to do the north portion of Part 4, which is a little less than half of the area, we estimated that to be about $75,000 to do the temporary stonework. So there hasn't been any engineering design done with respect to a topo survey and what the grades are. There may be a requirement for imported fill. In the event that you completed a temporary parking lot with granular materials, in the future wanted to convert that into more of a permanent solution, you would be able to retain a portion of that granular material that you placed. There would be loss with respect to contaminated material. That percentage, it's hard to say right now, but I would estimate that you'd probably end up wasting 30% of your granular base that you installed. And just to be clear, the options in the report that we're looking at for a permanent solution for a parking area, that would include all your underground storm sewer management, facility and infrastructure. A granular parking lot would not. It would just be graded and basically would provide temporary overflow parking. So in essence, you would be able to save some of that granular material, but there would be still a substantial cost to move forward with a permanent solution in the future.
Thank you. Go ahead, Councillor Hahn.
So thank you, Director Marr. So I would move a motion to actually endeavor the $75,000 to construct the temporary, and if we have to lose 30%, and that's kind of a maximum, that's just, I understand you have the ballpark and you'd have to calculate that out, but that being said, there's not a season that goes by that I don't receive complaints as to why there's parking shortages, so that would be a motion that I would absolutely support.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wink.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works. Assuming we put in a temporary parking lot, how will that impact snow removal?
Director?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So again, it would be a granular surface, so we would plow it and keep the snow off. But obviously, the drainage systems will not be in place. It won't be. You can grade it the best you can with the stone. There'll be continual ongoing maintenance with respect to that granular surface to keep it level. But there won't be a proper drainage system in place. But snow clearing would be done, pushed off to the one side of the lot, and then be made available for vehicles.
Councillor Wink?
Yeah, so then we're being asked for an additional $75,000. So I'd like to direct this to the treasurer on where that money is going to come from.
Ms. Quinlan?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, right now, it's not in the budget. So if it comes, it'll come from the reserves, but we already have allocated $93,000 to the road base reserve. And so my concern is, allocating additional budget dollars throughout the year that haven't been approved. This definitely will impact, let's say, next year's capital.
Thank you for that, Ms. Quinlan. I see Director Marr.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Mayor, again, sorry, I just wanted to clarify. The costs that I presented in that report in February were based on current costs at the time. And we have seen an increase in construction materials even as of late last year, early this winter. So that 75,000 for half the lot, it could be more than that. And I want to go back to the market to see what the actual cost would be for a temporary solution.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Wink, any other comments before I move on?
Yeah, I'd like to know what the dollar amount is. I understand where Councillor Hahn's coming from. Before we commit, I'd like to know what the numbers are going to look like.
So you would like a staff report, I take it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question for Director Martin. Recently, what I've seen is there's a facility that now crushes concrete that's used as a base material. I know that in the reconstruction of Pelham Street, we use rubble, which was created from the machine that takes off the asphalt on Pelham Street, and we use that as a base material. So is there an opportunity for us to also use those two supplies as a means to reducing the cost? Because I think that's what a lot of, I see some bigger projects using that right now. I saw a project in our municipality where they're using the crushed concrete, sorry, the crushed concrete from a local, their stuff, bringing it in, getting it crushed, bringing it back, and the cost of that load is half of a load of stone. And they're using rubble as well. And I know that you eventually have to use the stone getting through the process, but they've now added about 3 different courses before you get to the asphalt. So is that a possibility with regards to the staff study you can look into as to reducing the cost of the temporary parking lot?
Back to you, Director Marr.
Yes, thank you, through Mr. Mayor. So that's definitely an option. there's contractors and material suppliers that will recycle material, and it's very popular in the industry, and contractors actually build that into their pricing. So there are specifications that need to be met with respect to any of the road projects we do. They follow OPS specifications, Niagara Regional specifications. And so for a temporary solution, you definitely can look at recycled materials. With respect to the material that comes off the road itself, the RAP, they call it recycled asphalt pavement. Usually for any of our projects, the contractors build that discount into their work when they bid the job. They recycle that material back into their asphalt mixes and reuse it. So the town does receive the cost savings at the time of bidding by the contractors. There's definitely an opportunity. We own the material, so there's definitely an opportunity to work with a contractor and build that into a spec where we could definitely reuse recycled material in those areas. And we can explore that as part of the staff report if council wishes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you for that, Director of Public Works. Any other questions or comments? Then, Madam Clerk, I believe perhaps council needs a motion. Would you say that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. On the floor is the motion which is attached to the report, which is looking for council to make a decision on one of the four of the options: selling all of the lands, retaining all of the lands for parking, selling part of the lands and retaining some for parking, etc. So once council deals with this, then perhaps after dealing with that as part of the amendment, when you choose the option and the items A, B, or C, perhaps an amendment could also be included to receive a staff report if that is what council is also looking for with respect to the updated costs for creating a temporary parking lot.
Okay, so right now we have to fill in that blank.
Right now, council is looking to fill in this particular blank and make that decision, but certainly council could include within their amendments if they wish to have a staff report.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Councillor Hahn.
Yes, through the mayor. So as I read A, B, and C, I'm not in favor of either of them. Are we not able to add a D, which would be to have a staff report then made to address the temporary parking lot that's discussed?
Absolutely. So council first needs that there's another blank prior. So for an example, if I'm hearing you correctly, you may like option 2, retain all the lands for parking lot expansion, and that you might strike options B and C, or A, B, and C, and insert option D, that council direct staff to bring a report. Certainly that is for council to make that decision, but it all would need to happen together. Oh, I see the CAO may wish to speak as well.
Mr. CAO?
So we might get ourselves out of a difficulty. So we received the report for information. We can all agree on that, so we can move forward. Step 1. If you go with option 2 and you say, the council's preference is to keep the land for parking and add in the words "at this time," then that gets us over our next difficulty. And then you could add and request a report from the Public Works Department addressing, different options and costing them out by August 22nd, 2022. And we can bring them to that council meeting night. And then you're equipped to make a decision if you wish, or simply make a recommendation and refer something to a future budget with a specific number, a reliable number at that time.
Thank you. Certainly council could make that as an amendment. Certainly, yes.
Okay, Councillor Hahn?
Yes, thank you. So I would be happy to put forward that amendment, but I'd like to see that in the early August as opposed to late August if possible.
We only have one council meeting.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes. Our August date is August 22nd. That's the only date council does meet in August.
Okay.
So would it be possible then, don't we have a meeting though near the end of July? I don't have the calendar in front of me.
Yes, currently there is a July 25th meeting scheduled.
So would it be possible to do that for July, have those options presented by July 25th?
Mr. CAO?
Well, I should defer that to Mr. Marr. This is not a report that I'll be writing.
Okay, Mr. Marr, that's just a little over a month. What's your feelings on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So it is kind of a tight timeline to turn around. I would want to be speaking to the market to find out what the current prices is for doing the work, the temporary work. Also, I think it's fair to say that we need to do some engineering on this to try to get some great topographic surveys done to find out what the grades are, how much imported material needs to come in. So I would be more comfortable with the August 20th date.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hahn?
Yeah, through the mayor. So I guess this question would be to the CAO. So will that pose an issue with regards to getting the work done in theory in this term with this council?
It could. We can't. I don't know what the council's capacity will be to spend more than $50,000 on an item at that point in time.
That's my point. Yeah.
So that's something that indirectly only council controls. But council can spend up to $50,000 even if it turns out that it is at that point in time lame duck. And moreover, that would probably be enough to cover some engineering studies or maybe just aggregate on a portion, maybe not all of but maybe a third or a half. I'm making these numbers up, but you do see some of the data from in the report written by Mr. Marr. And while we don't know the exact numbers for aggregate, et cetera, at the moment, 50,000 would go somewhere, maybe more than 0% of it. So even in a worst case scenario, I think you'd still have some capacity to deliver if that were the will of council.
Councillor Hahn?
No, thank you. I'd just like to have it done if possible, if council's amenable to have this done in this term. It's something that we were asked for 4 years ago to do, so.
Okay, thank you. I see Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with our director is saying we need the proper topographical survey and some engineering work before we proceed, because we have to make sure that what we're doing is the right thing. So I don't know that I'd love to have it in July, but I think August the 22nd is pretty tough. So because I think that preliminary work is necessary. I don't want to. I agree we need to do something, but I don't want to spend more money just because we don't have the right engineering, because the right engineering, as we learned from the MCC, can save you a lot of money. So we need to do that part of it properly. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wink.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Marr, if the stars align all the right way, is it possible that we could get temporary parking in for the snowflies?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't foresee this project taking any longer than 2 weeks to complete, start to finish. It'll just be basically stripping off topsoil and preparing the sub base and placing either some type of recycled material or virgin granular. It'll be a quick operation. I just want to make sure that I got the information so I know how much material we're talking. If council is considering going with a temporary solution here, I want to make sure that I'm giving you accurate numbers.
Yeah, so from what I'm understanding, then the engineering probably will take more time than the actual physical work.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So I'll need some time to get a surveyor on board. We'll want to take some shots to confirm what the grades are, and then basically get some idea of how much topsoil's there, what has to be removed, and then we'll have to match the existing surface, right? So that'll determine how much material needs to come in.
Councillor Wink.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. I'm going to throw this to Mr. Cribbs. with a $50,000 spending limit, is it possible that this council puts a limit through at this point in time on what to spend, so that way it gets done?
Yes, you are fully competent to make any sort of financial decision you wish at this point in time. Ms. Quinlan Murphy's, basic point is that it's not budgeted, and everything she says is correct, but you do have the power to tell us to.
Yeah.
So if you were to do that, it would be important to specify which reserve you'd most like that to come from. Actually, I'll defer that entirely to her. I won't pretend. She's got the expertise. I'm definitely not your CPA. So if you were going to do that, you make it conditional. You have already delegated spending authority to my office in the event that the lame duck is triggered. So in this case, you could pre-approve notionally up to X dollars. You pick the X. You also have to specify which account it would come from. And then if that were to happen, say August 22nd, you would wish to do that, then you're competent to make a decision now and give that direction now. It would be on the record. I would be comfortable to sign the check to sign on your behalf at that point in time, because it was passed appropriately now. So you could do that conditionally. I don't know where the funds would come from, and please ask questions of Ms. Quinlan Murphy, but you are capable of doing that this evening.
Okay, so I believe we'll go to the treasurer, and your thoughts on this action that the CAO has suggested.
So the only reserve, through you, Mr. Mayor, the only reserve that this can come from is the roads reserve, because it's a road, it's the roads reserve. So what's happening here, you're just using funds against next year's capital.
Yes.
Yes.
You'll just have less to spend next year, or you'll make up for it next year with an increase in taxes to compensate what needs to go into the reserves.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Corr.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wing. Did we not pass a motion we had to vote first to go into any reserves? We just can't go into reserves. We have to, as a group, say yes, and then we decide what reserve we're going to take money from?
I don't recall that, but I think that's what we would be effectively doing at this point in time.
Yeah. Perhaps Ms. Quinlan, do you remember council, there was something, you're right, Councillor Corr, about going into reserves. Is that something that we would have to vote on it in itself? Is that right or not?
Well, you would have to vote on the approval to transfer money out of the reserves. Yes, the whole council would have to approve that.
Okay, thank you.
We would have, excuse me, Mr. Mayor, so that means we have to vote on that first and then vote on the amount.
Well, I think you should know the amount that's being transferred. So if you want to transfer money into the reserves, we don't need any approvals because that's money going in, but going out, definitely it's part of the decision here. The amount, and it's coming from the roads reserve.
Councillor Corr? Oh, okay, are you done?
No, thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Councillor CAO Cribs, I see you had, thought I saw your hand up. No?
I think effectively it's been addressed. Thank you,
Okay,
sir.
thank you. Then go to Councillor Hildebrand.
Hey, Mr. Mayor, I'm still back on the technical part of making sure we get the right budget before we even proceed to spending money. And that is the fact that you're talking about just doing a topographical survey and then getting some prices. Don't you think you need to do a core sample to make sure you know what you got before you're digging down to the dirt and putting a base down?
To the director?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, for any permanent type of installation, definitely you would want to do geotechnical work. With respect to a temporary parking lot, and I'll how we came up with the estimate in February as part of report 2022-0020 was we looked at the area. We assumed that there would be some excavation work, and then we looked at placing 300 millimeters or 1 foot of virgin crushed granular A. So over the entire part 4, that estimate was about 170,000. And if you look at just the northern portion, doing the northern portion, which is again a little less than half, I basically prorated it to get the estimate of about $75,000 for. So that's pricing that was done back in February. There may be some increases in materials and costs right now, but if we're actually looking at doing this as a more of a still temporary but more of a permanent solution, then we would want to do the engineering work up front, exactly do the survey work, find out how much material's got to come in, and then we can come up with some more defined, more accurate costs. But that's basically, I just want to give council the details on how I came up with that estimate back in February. So there would be definitely some more engineering work. We wouldn't be doing boreholes to determine what the substructure is for a temporary parking lot solution. For a permanent one, yes.
Okay, thank you for that, Director. Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you to the director, is it possible for you to come up with that information by the August 22nd date as well? I hate to spend money on something temporary and then it becomes permanent and we dig it all out. That's my only concern.
Right. So yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So if I understand correctly, August meeting, 22nd, we would be bringing back a report which would include a more detailed cost estimate with respect to the quantities of material, understanding that it's still a temporary parking lot in nature, and understanding fully that if the solution long-term was to develop the parking lot into a permanent paved parking lot, that you would be able to reuse some of that granular material. Obviously, some of it would be lost and not recoverable, but we would be able to use a portion of that granular material, but you'd basically be starting from scratch for a permanent solution. This would definitely take care of a temporary condition, but only a temporary condition. So the answer is yes, I would come back with a report in August with respect to more refined cost estimate on what we need to do for a temporary parking lot, and what those costs are.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hildebrand, any more?
Yep. Like I said, I have a hard time spending stuff on temporary if it becomes permanent. I'm not saying yes or no at this point. I guess we've got to wait and see.
Okay, thank you. My own personal comment is that the other council got in trouble by spending money that wasn't budgeted. We've already spent $93,000 tonight fixing roads. We're not budgeted for this, and here we got an engineering study that's going to eat up considerable money, and then we're going to have a truckload of gravel left over that we can buy to after the engineering study's done. So myself, I'm going to vote against this. We're tying next council's hands up. We're budgeting, we're spending money that we don't have. We got to take it out of reserves. Yes, it would be nice to do the parking study or to do the parking, but my own feeling is let the next budget determine what we're going to do for parking. That's how I would feel on this. Councillor Hildebrand?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to talk to the director, but I don't really think we're spending a truckload of money getting the information. But maybe I'm wrong. To the director, is there a truckload of money going to be spent doing this investigation in this report?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't expect there would be large costs involved with what I need to do to find out, to get a more defined estimate on what the temporary parking costs would be. Literally, I think the plan here is to get a surveying company and to give us some grades, maybe dig a couple test pits so we know what the existing makeup of and how much topsoils are that we need to get rid of. But that would be the extent of it.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Wink.
So, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director of Public Works, would this work be able to be done in, let's say, February? So after the budget's been approved?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, I would, even it being a temporary parking lot, I would not recommend the construction of any construction work to happen in February.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? We have to make some, go ahead, Madam Clerk. What is the resolution on this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, did you want me to read the initial resolution or the potential amendment that I believe Councillor Hahn is looking for?
Go ahead, give us the amendment.
And Councillor Hahn can correct me if I'm mistaken.
Of course.
Certainly, she wants to receive the report for information, but then the motion would be amended to strike all of the language after council directs staff, and it would be inserted, retain all lands at this time, and that council directs staff to report back to council by August 22nd, 2022 with respect to an updated cost for creating a temporary parking lot on the lands adjacent to the MCC known as Part 4, and that council pre-approve blank dollars being an unbudgeted cost for a project creating a temporary parking lot on the lands adjacent to the MCC known as Part 4, and that the project amount be funded from the roads reserves. I would just look to see from Councillor Hahn if that is correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so I do have noted that Councillor Hahn is the mover. She would be looking for a seconder.
Okay. Is there a seconder? And I see Councillor Stewart is seconding it.
Council certainly can discuss this now.
Okay, so we're discussing the items that the clerk has just read. Go ahead, Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm asking that motion be divided into different items.
Okay.
Certainly, the blank does still need to be filled in. So Councillor Hahn and Councillor Stewart, just and that council pre-approve blank dollars being unbudgeted costs. I don't know what amount you are looking to put there.
Councillor Hildebrand?
I can't answer that question. I want to vote on each item separately.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yes, I'm
Thank
looking
you.
for Councillor Hahn and Councillor Stewart to provide me that particular number.
Councillor Hahn?
So I guess I would ask for a combination between the CAO and the Director of Public Works, and if we're looking at 75,000, and that was in February, and costs have gone up. But at the same time, there can be a combination of monies that the CAO is able to move forward. We don't probably have to put the full amount, as you articulated earlier. We could leave it at 75, and if it's more, then you have the authority to move ahead on that. What would be your suggestion at this point?
Mr. CEO?
Well, so to be clear, I do want to reiterate Ms. Quinlan Murphy's advice that this isn't the ideal process. You have the capacity to do this thing. So, and council's limited to spending 50,000 in the event it's in lame duck. Right now, you could approve more than that. If it is the will of the council to, at this point in time, make an amendment to the approved budget for 2022, I would suggest you do it in the amount of $100,000. Whether that gets it all done or not, I can't say, but you can decide after you get a report from Mr. Marr whether that's, although you can't at that point in time authorize the spending, you can still indicate your preferences, and provided we have the money approved in budget, which would have, at that point in time it would be because you'd have done it tonight, we'd be able to proceed. So it's probably the notion of delegating your authority is just that I would have power in the event of an emergency. I don't think it's a proper use of that power simply because of preferences. I have no intention of using it unless it's truly needed. In fairness, because I'm not an elected official. So I think if you put a number in tonight, you look at 100,000, so we have enough. Again, it's not our advice that you do this, but you do have the power and the right to do so. And then I'll defer to Ms. Quinlan Murphy because I definitely see that hand up there.
Yeah, Ms. Quinlan Murphy?
So through you, Mr. Mayor, as the treasurer, my concern here is that we still have projects, capital projects that we have to go out for tender. The biggest one right now that the Public Works Department is working on is Pelham Street. And if I just had a 30% increase on the road rehabilitation, that was $93,300. That Pelham Street project is a very large project, and I think we're looking at about at least $200,000 or $300,000 possibly being over on that one. So, I mean, the Director of Public Works can talk about that, but I have a serious concern here that we are now going off the capital list, a project that was not approved in the 2022 budget, and we have very high increases in costs right now in our procurement. So, at the end of the day, we are spending above the approved budget. That's a serious concern for me, especially knowing that Pelham Street is about, almost $3 million project, Jason, that we're going out for tender.
Director of Public Works, please.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So the Pelham Street reconstruction project for phase 3, the approved budget as part of the 2022 capital budget, there was $3.6 million from the roads reserve, and there was $600,000 from the water reserve. So we're getting ready to go out tender on this project. The engineering is complete. We're actually working with purchasing right now to start the tendering process on this. Obviously, the market will dictate the prices and what the value and cost of that contract would be. But with looking at recent projects that have closed, and one being with the town of Pelham, the road rehab program, there are indications that that budget will be exceeded. So hard to tell at this point in time until we actually tender that and get the numbers in.
Thank you. I see Councillor Corr.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. I know 2 weeks ago we approved the parking for Ridgeville. What was the cost and where was that money coming from again?
I believe you're mistaken. If I'm not mistaken, I believe you're mistaken. I don't think we approved that. Did we not ask for a staff report?
A study?
Yes, Mr. CAO, can you recall that?
I apologize.
Well, certainly, I don't recall you approving new spending. Madam Clerk can help us with this, or maybe the Deputy Clerk is probably searching for it.
Yeah,
right now, it's in real time. Maybe one of them can help us with this specific.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sure Ms. Leach is probably looking up the motion. I believe the councillor is talking about the motion that was brought forward by Councillor Olson with respect to looking at a report regarding the parking on the water station. Is that what you are thinking, Councillor Corr?
Yes, and do we not put an estimate on what we're going to spend on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't think that there is, but I suspect that the Deputy Clerk is just pulling up that resolution just to make sure. As I said, that was at the last meeting, and she can let us know.
Yes.
Okay. And to further, I agree with the mayor. I hate going into reserves, and I will vote against this. I sat on the budget committee, and I know Mr. Councillor Wink and the rest of the committee worked so hard to get those reserves to where we are, and we're doing exactly what we said we weren't going to do. So I won't support it.
Okay, thank you for those comments, Councillor. I see Councillor Wink.
Yes, so I agree with Councillor Corr's comments and that of the mayor. It is an out-of-budget item. I understand fully what Ms. Quinlan Murphy's concerns are on this. And, while I would like to have parking, it's something that probably has to be addressed in next year's capital budget, be it temporary or permanent.
Sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, I've just heard back from the Deputy Clerk, and she has confirmed that no money was associated in that motion, which was approved by Council. Rather, Council just directed staff to bring a report with respect to what could be done at that particular location.
I apologize. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Corr, no problem. Councillor Hahn.
Through the mayor, so I'll revert back to what I guess I originally intended, and that was A, not to sell the land, and B, to have a report come back from Director Marr with regards to our options and our costs, and we'll leave it at that. We don't need to assign an amount tonight and put ourselves in a pickle. I understand that, and I understand the concern. So we'll go with the first option that I presented, and perhaps just vote on that if that works for everyone.
Okay, Councillor Hahn, Deputy, or I'm sorry, to the clerk.
Thank you. So this is the amendment now being presented from Councillor Hahn is to receive the report for information and to strike the language just to then state to retain the lands at this time, and that council directs staff to report back to council by August 22nd, 2022 with respect to an updated cost for creating temporary parking lot on the lands adjacent to the MCC known as Part 4. Is that correct, Councillor?
Correct.
And then I just would like to ask that Councillor Stewart is also satisfied with that.
Councillor Stewart?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. That is now what the amendment is on the floor if council wishes to further discuss.
Okay, so now what the clerk just read is the new amendment. Excuse me. Excuse me. Any discussion or comment on the amendment? Councillor Stewart?
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. It's not directly to the amendment, but it's a question for Director Marr. He said that the tendering will be going out for Pelham Street. Do you expect the results of that to be back by August 22nd?
Mr. Mayor, yes, our standard practice is to have the tender period be 3 weeks. And we're looking at getting that tender out on the market within the next day or two. So,
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or questions before we call the vote? Not seeing any hands, Madame?
Thank you. I do know Councillor Hildebrand had requested that the motion be, that the amendment be divided. Is he still wishing to do so, or has he withdrawn the request?
I will withdraw that request, but I also will not spend money from reserves. So, but having a report is a good benefit because obviously we're going to have to set the budget for 2023 if we don't have the money available this year.
Thank you for that confirmation. So the amendment is to indicate that the lands are to be retained at this time and to look for a report back to council. Mr. Mayor, would you like me to call the vote, or is there further discussion?
I'll go one more time, one last time. Any comments or questions before we call the vote? Not seeing any hands, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That amendment does carry. That does bring you now to the main motion as amended to you for discussion.
Okay, back to the main motion as amended. Any discussion on this? Not seeing any. Go Councillor Hildebrand.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Would it be possible, the clerk, to reread the motion we're voting on now for clarification?
I think that's an excellent idea. Madam Clerk?
Certainly. Be it resolved, the council receive report 2022-0144, parking and development options for lands adjacent to Meridian Community Center for information. And further, be it resolved that council retain all lands at this time, and that council directs staff to report back to council by August 22nd, 2022 with respect to an updated cost for creating a temporary parking lot on the lands adjacent to the MCC known as Part 4.
Thank you.
No problem, Councillor. Any other further discussion on the motion as amended? Not seeing any hands, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Just for clarity, I am using Councillor Hahn and Councillor Stewart as the movers and seconders for this as well. And this vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrand.
Yes.
Councillor Kaur.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to the presentation and consideration of bylaws. I have a motion put forth by Councillor Stewart, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that Council for the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do read a first, second, and third time and do pass same, and that the mayor and clerk be and are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. 1. Bylaw 4463-2022, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136-1987 as amended for lands on the north side of Port Robinson Road, east of Station Street, legally described as part of Lot 167, Geographic Township of Thorold, part of Lots 17, 18, and 19, Plan 717, Town of Pelham, for residential multiple 1-263 RM1-263 and residential development RD zones to a site-specific residential 2 R2-322 zone. Hummel Properties, Inc., file number AM0721. 2. Bylaw 4464-2022, being a bylaw to adopt an amendment to the official plan for the Town of Pelham planning area, amendment number 14, Summersides Village, file number OPAM2-21. 3. Bylaw 4470-2022, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Innova STEM Labs, Inc. for STEM camp programs. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Any discussion on these bylaws just read by the clerk? And I see Councillor Kaur.
Yeah. Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor. Could we have these vote separate?
Madam Clerk?
Certainly, it's just a request, so I do have Councillor Kaur requesting the matter be considered individually.
Okay, thank you. Yes, we will do that.
And just to get clarification, and no disrespect to you, Your Honor, when we take a recorded vote, is there a difference, Madam Clerk?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. I certainly do record all of the
Earlier,
votes.
excuse me, I'm sorry. Earlier this meeting, the mayor wanted a recorded vote, and is there any difference in what we're doing today? We record our votes.
There's no difference. We do record the votes. However, if an individual has asked me to record the vote, I do put that as a notation within the minutes. So within the minutes, when the mayor requested that recorded vote, it will be in the minutes. That would be the only difference that I would do.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that, and I wanted a recorded vote then.
Okay, thank you. So the council, we will be splitting the bylaws individually, and we will be having a recorded vote. Is there any other comments or questions? I see Councillor Hahn.
Yes, thank you. Through the mayor, I have some comments and also some questions with regards to number 1 and number 2. So that's 1136 and 4464, adoption of the official plan. So first I'll start with the comments and questions. A local tabloid has chosen to create alarmist false narrative, intentionally spreading misinformation, which has sadly become common behavior, disrespecting the intelligence of our residents in the process. Asking for clarification for a developer to have the opportunity to speak to council should be embraced, as the record clearly reflects that the prospective development plan has indeed been altered from what our public was presented. Our director of planning has indeed commented twice there has been a plan change, yet this local tabloid would have you believe that councillors that recognize this change should be ridiculed and harassed. It is indeed the role of a councillor to ensure that the business of the town is conducted fairly, regardless of the imposed fear and intimidation. As I've articulated now 3 times in councillor, I continue to take issue with our public reviewing a proposed development sign for several months, and that still shows today with just one road to Summerside Street. Why was this plan changed, along with what the information was presented in the public meeting, and contrary to what local residents continue to view on the proposed sign, still posted along Port Robinson Road today? There were 2 different plans. The first on the sign, and the second one was the Hummel Properties was asked to follow. Hummel Properties has only done what the Director of Planning has asked them to do. So I asked, why was a second road added, and why does the sign continue to show one road? The saw property developer, indeed with existing financial non-refundable obligations, was not granted the opportunity to speak to this council tonight. Their correspondence on this agenda is significant and relevant based on the confusion these changes have caused. Looking forward to learning what town staff will propose now so as not to prevent Hummel from achieving their goal of building affordable single-family homes for our residents, while recognizing that the current property owner along Station will no longer support a second road. Seems there could be a bumpy road ahead that can't be blamed on certain councillors, as there is no way to force a road through a property if the owner will simply not allow it.
So your question then is to, I believe, Director of Public Works, or I mean, Planning, and that is the road.
Director of Planning.
Okay, go ahead, Director of Planning, Ms. Weens.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. So one of the requirements when we receive a zoning bylaw application is that there is a public notice sign posted on the property prior to us getting the application. So that public notice sign was posted in September 2021. That came in with the application. It's part of the requirements that they post on the site, that this is what is proposed for the lands. The sign typically doesn't change. It was what was the application was. It's the initial application. Through the review process and comments that were received, there were changes made to the draft plan. The draft plan that was circulated with the public meeting notice that went out to all residents showed 2 street connections. So the public was informed of that through the public notification process. SAW Developments were informed. Certainly, we had conversations with them prior to them purchasing this property that the desire was to have 2 street connections. They were well aware of that position. They were advised of that as well during the pre-consultation meeting that was held in February, which was again prior to the public meeting that was held in March. So, you know, this was information that they were informed of prior to their putting in an offer to purchase these lands. So the process is that there is a public notice sign put on the property at the very beginning. And then oftentimes what happens is that the plans get revised based on input received either from agencies, commenting agencies, and from the public. So the demonstration plan that's in the official plan shows 2 street connections at this area. Council approved on the opposite side of Summersides Boulevard here, a subdivision with 2 street connections. And so having the 2 developments connect and integrate is important to provide for connectivity within the subdivisions, traffic management, and just generally the principle of building strong communities. So that's the reason why there was the request for a second street connection, is that it was consistent with what was in the demonstration plan in the town's official plan and consistent with previous development approvals that were granted by council.
Councillor Hahn?
So further to that, and thank you for that explanation. So further to that, then, based on the correspondence that we all received earlier today, and even if these bylaws number 1 and 2 are passed this evening shortly, assuming that they are, let's just say, what happens now if the existing owner of the property does not allow for a second road through his property? How does that get forced?
So when we receive a development application on those lands, then we would be dealing with it at this time. Currently, we don't have any development application on those lands. So until we get a development application, we won't be dealing with it. So development happens in an incremental process, but you know, this subdivision, the Summersides Village subdivision, if it is approved, will provide for those street connections. And certainly the expectation is when we get the development plan for the adjacent lands, they would follow through with those street connections.
So until such time, so if it's 5 years or 10 years, there just will be 2 roads, but they'll be dead end, basically. Somebody would have to turn around because they wouldn't be able to, you'd have to, either that or you'd temporarily loop the road, I suppose, right?
That's correct. The draft plan condition allows for a temporary road to loop those until such time as we get the street connections.
Okay, great. Thanks for the explanation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I see Councillor Corr.
Yes, to you, Mr. Mayor, to the director. The question I have for you is, first of all, there is no vacant land. The people that own that land owned it for 80 years. They have a viable business there. There's brothers who work every day there. What they asked me is that if they wanted to expand that business, are we going to allow the permits to build not temporary, but buildings to shed their machines or to keep their machines in? Would there be any difficulties now?
Ms. Weems?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, so the existing business that exists on that property is certainly allowed to continue. If they want to provide new buildings or that kind of stuff, as long as they conform with the zoning, they would be allowed to do so. But understand that the official plan laid out the long-term intent for those lands by designating them medium-density residential. And so that's the future intent of the land use for those lands. And as residential development gets closer to them, their business is certainly going to be impacted by that.
So one more question. It's commercial now, is it not?
Ms. Weems?
The zoning on those lands, I believe, is actually agricultural.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions, comments on the bylaws? I turn to the clerk.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I just want to confirm with Councillor Corr that he would be satisfied to hear the first 2 bylaws together. I know that's what Council did the last time, so that would be for Bylaw 4463 and 4464. You'd like to hear that together and then separately the third one, am I correct?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, is Council ready for the vote?
I believe so. I see no hands.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
No.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
No.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your last bylaw, and this is Bylaw 4470, 2022. For discussion, Mr. Mayor, is any discussion?
Okay, so we're on number 3, I believe. Any discussion by council on this remaining bylaw? And I don't see any hands, Madam Clerk.
Thank you. This vote begins with Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Corr.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. Mr. Mayor, that brings you to your next item of the day, which is your motion. To you, Mr. Mayor, for your motion, you would need to vacate your seat as chair, and our deputy mayor, Councillor Corr, would act, and he would be the presiding officer over this. And Mr. Mayor, would you like to read your motion into the record, or would you like me to do that for you?
Well, first, I think we have to make sure the deputy mayor is prepared to fulfill his duty. Councillor Corr, are you ready to step in as deputy mayor?
I don't think the shoes are that big. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Madam Clerk, I need the reading practice. So if it's all right with you, I will
Absolutely,
read it.
certainly.
Whereas the corporation of the town of Pelham has enacted a naming of corporate assets policy to govern the process of naming significant municipal assets such as parks, open spaces, facilities, street and other municipal buildings or properties after groups or individuals who have positively contributed or represented the town of Pelham. And whereas the late Jane Haste, longtime resident of the town of Pelham, competed on behalf of the Pelham District High School track and field team around the world in such places as Australia, New Zealand, Russia, Israel, Mexico, Ukraine, Sweden, Norway, United States, and Great Britain. And whereas the late Jane Haste furthered her athletic career and accomplishments by competing in the 1974 Commonwealth Games in New Zealand, winning gold medals in women's shot put and discus, 1975 winning a bronze medal at the Pan American Games in Mexico, 1977 and 78 winning the AIAW National Championship in discus, and represented Canada as an Olympian at the 1976 Olympics in Montreal. And whereas Council for the Town of Pelham deems it desirable to recognize Jane Haste by naming a community asset after her, now therefore it be resolved that Council for the Town of Pelham direct staff to provide a report to Council outlining opportunities to honor the late Jane Haste, and that staff shall report back to Council by July 25th, 2022, and obviously I believe that that date can be very flexible, I believe. But that is my motion, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, it goes to the Deputy Mayor to preside over discussion.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Is there any more discussion from you, Your Honor? Or
No,
do you want to add any more?
No, thank you, Deputy Clerk Cora.
Can we go
Deputy
to
Mayor.
Councillor Olson, who seconded the motion? Do you want to add anything to the motion or add any thoughts or discussion to this?
Through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, I think the motion is very complete, and it's an occasion to honor somebody who did something on the world stage, and this will be an excellent motion, an excellent report, I think, and hope we come up with an appropriate options, without trying to pre-describe something, but it has all kinds of possibilities for it. So that's why I'm in favor of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I open it up to the rest of the council. Anybody have any comments or discussion? Councillor Wink?
Yes, I definitely will be supporting this motion, and I thank the mayor for bringing this forward. I did not know of this lady. I did not know of these accomplishments, and her accomplishments are outstanding and need to be recognized. And I think the community needs to be able to recognize these people even earlier. We don't have to wait until they pass away. We did recognize Steve Bauer and Marlene Stewart Street, but it's sad in a way that she didn't get to see the recognition that she so deservedly deserves at this point in time. So again, thanks for bringing this forward. Thanks for enlightening a lot of us who didn't know who she was, but I fully support what the motion is.
Thank you, Councillor Wink. Councillor Hahn?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think it's a good motion, and to Councillor Wink's point. So when we did the changes and dedicated the survey to our to Councillor Wink, or to Councillor Chofie, we, as you may have noticed when you were there, put a series of pictures of our hometown celebrities, I guess we can call them, for sports. And certainly they're not all deceased. Some are, but certainly anytime anybody feels that there's somebody that's got a real sport achievement in our town, the idea is that we would include their picture under the plexiglass that surrounds the servery. James is already there, so we recognize that already. So she's already there, but certainly I'd support another endeavor as well. But going forward, if there's anybody else that you think is remarkable in the area of sports, certainly bring that to the attention of the MCC, and we'd be happy to include that in the survey as well.
Thank you, Councillor Hahn. Any other councillors that want to make a remark? Or I don't see any. I give it back to Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Core.
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Core. That does carry.
I'll give your shoes back now, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, sir, and you did a fine job.
Through you, Mr.
Just make sure it's in the paper.
Madam Clerk?
Thank you. I have noted that you have resumed the chair, Mr. Mayor. That does bring us to Councillor Core's notice of motion, and I just asked Councillor Core if he still chooses to go through with this. I know the bylaws did pass, or if he would like to withdraw his notice of motion.
No, I will withdraw that motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Core. I have so noted. Through you, Mr. Mayor, that does bring us to our confirming bylaw, and I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Hahn, seconded by Councillor Stewart. Be it resolved that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and do pass, being a bylaw number 4471/2022, to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council for the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 20th day of June 2022. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Okay, any discussion on this bylaw? Do not see any hands, Madam Clerk?
Thank you. The vote begins with Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Core.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry. To you, Mr. Mayor, I do have a motion put forth by Councillor Wink, seconded by Councillor Olson. Be it resolved that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until the next regular meeting scheduled for July 25th, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. To you, Mr. Mayor, for discussion.
Any discussion on adjournment? Not seeing any hands?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This vote begins with Councillor Stewart.
Yes.
Councillor Wink.
Yes.
Councillor Hahn.
Yes.
Councillor Hildebrandt.
Yes.
Councillor Core.
Yes.
Councillor Olson.
Yes.
Mayor Junkin.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That does carry, and it is 8:30, and you can gavel out your meeting.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, all.
Good night, everyone.